My name is Jordan Weaver.
And I'm Lacey Weaver. Thanks so much for joining us. The first thing that we want you to do is to take out your phone and download the Shiloh Ranch Church app.
You're going to hear a lot of moving pieces, YouTube channel, 1017 Project. There's going to be a lot of things mentioned, but ultimately our goal is to start moving people towards biblical literacy, the gospel of Jesus, who he says he is in his word, what his word means, and what that means for us. And so with everything else that you're going to have going on around you, ultimately our goal would be that you understand Jesus on a deeper level based on what his word says.
I'm gonna kind of keep banging the intention drum for a minute, for the next probably, a few weeks, I don't know. But what's interesting to me is how we can go through a pattern because it's what we've done before and never stop to think, why am I doing this? Lacey says all the time, like she doesn't want to ever catch herself in life standing in line, but she doesn't know what she's standing in line for. You know, like a group of people that are just standing in line looking at a wall because they think that's where the line is. You know, that's like one of her just personal fears is like, I want to know why I'm doing what I'm doing. And so we're here, we've put effort into being here, we're intentionally here, we've got people that are tuning in. We've actually got more people right now than we broke an attendance record in the digital services at Shiloh Ranch last week. Like people are making an effort to, in essence, be here or be a part of what God's doing right here. And I want to make sure that we understand why. I want to make sure that we're always referencing, but like we know why we're doing this. The intention is this, is that we believe we are going to see Jesus more clearly. You know, this idea of being self-taught is okay. It's okay, and I think to some degree we can be self-taught at certain things, but how many times do you know that when somebody is self-taught, so many times the things they teach themselves, you know, how do we know? I heard a guy say one time, it doesn't matter how much you know, it's if what you know is right. And it's my belief that God is going to bring our understanding of who he is to a higher level. And it's like a light, that the closer we get to Jesus, the more we're able to see everything. Nothing in your life doesn't stand to benefit from knowing Jesus better based on what his word tells us about him. That's why we're here. It's worth it. It is worth it. If we had to drive 5 hours to be right here, if that's what Jesus is going to do, then it's worth the effort. If you had to push 37 buttons on some sort of a device to get in here, then it's worth it. If that's what Jesus is going to do, then instead of going like, oh, I guess I'll go to church. What is it this week? What is it this week that you're going to take out of this and go home and apply to your life and watch God improve your life the way that it is? Okay, a higher perspective. Now, that being said, please be here next week. Please be here. Please tune in. Please make it a point, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the ball on the tee this week for next week. And so if you leave and you're like, well, this sermon was just okay. Well, it's not finished yet. James chapter 1, verse 2. You've heard it. Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, when you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. If any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. It's not necessarily my favorite verse, and actually the more I learn about it, the more difficult I realize what we just read really means. I've got a dog right now, and his name is Rip. I didn't name him. I get asked that all the time. Oh, did you name him? Because I'm like, that was his name when I got him. His name's Rip. And he's got this thing that he loves to do. He loves working cows, but more than that, he loves riding in the bed of the truck and barking at cars when they come by. And I can't tell you what joy he gets out of it. I really don't know. But I know this, he times it up, and you can see him, he's like, they're coming, ah! And like he's into it, he loves it. And he's so into it that my other dog, Gus, my old dog, he's always in a bad mood, he's always grumpy, and you can see he's just like, get off of me. But he's so into it, my fear is, because they ride around a flatbed pickup, my fear is that someday he's gonna be so in the moment that him or my other dog are, And so I made an executive decision, and I knew that it wasn't gonna go over well, and I was right. I chained him to the little roll rack, and I scooted it over towards the passenger side, and that way, he's not gonna cause any damage to himself or the other dog. Now, fast forward. Now he's just mad. And it's a familiar, you could see it. It's not like I have some like inroad into his mind or anything crazy. He demonstrates it so vividly that he's just so mad because he feels like, he's like, I can't even see the car. You know, he's trying to look over and he's mad and he's just chewing on the chain. Just, if it wasn't for the stupid chain, I could be doing what I wanted to do. He's just mad. He's just shaking and mad. The chain to him represents something much different than it does to me. Because to me, I see the chain one way, and he sees the chain a completely different way. In fact, you can just almost see it like, if it wasn't for this stupid chain, I could be happy. I could be happy again. I could be back to doing the thing that I love the most in life, which is barking at cars. I still don't understand it. I would love to explain it. I don't get it, but you can just see that there's one thing standing between him and the life that he desires. Now, I am not going to preach all day about a dog, but the same chain that is saving his life is the source of his anger. Think of this. His source of anger is also at work saving his life. So it's a matter of perspective. Do you see what I'm saying here? So when I say that we come to church, I'm like, I want to know Jesus better, because if I can understand Jesus better, if I can have a relationship with Jesus, if I can see Jesus more clearly, I think there are areas in my life that if I could see them the way he sees them, they would quit causing me so much distress. Fair? So let's break it down. There's three parts. There's three parts to what James is saying. He's saying, consider it pure joy. That's why I smile, because imagine that you had a counseling session with me. That in itself is almost laughable, because I don't do counseling, because I'm really bad at that. Anybody who's gone through counseling with any would agree. And you were to go, this is what's causing me problems. I'm in a trial. I'm in this frustration. I would go, oh, you should consider that joy. It's probably the end of the meeting. Like, if you would say that to me, it's because you don't understand what I'm going through. So James, consider it pure joy, brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. James is not being naive. He's not writing this not paying attention or being unaware. It would be so easy to read this and think, James doesn't get me. James could not possibly understand my life, because when you use the word trials, let me say this. If you use the word trials, it's this indicator that something beyond your choice has been violated. He's not saying that he doesn't understand your trial. James is writing this indicating you don't understand your trial. James isn't naive to what's actually going on. We are. He's saying if you could understand what God is doing, the active work that God is doing in your life, then you would see it differently. There we go again, a higher perspective than the one that we just walked in with. God, show me what I can't see on my own. I think as people, we tend to, and maybe we wouldn't say this, so understand, I'm giving you a very general sense, but I think as people, we restrict life to this one sentence. I could be happy and free and fulfilled if, fill in the blank. If only. Have you ever heard anybody that says this? Must be nice. Must be nice. They're seeing the result. Oh, must be nice. I could be happy if my life had, if. So we restrict all of God's plans in our life, of everything God's intending to do in our life. We restrict it to, I could be happy and I could be fulfilled if. And we set the parameters of our happiness behind the word if. Let's go back to my dog for a second. I could be happy if this stupid chain wasn't here. I could be free to do whatever I want to do if it wasn't for this stupid chain. If, give you a couple examples, you guys have some, you know what yours are. If I had more money, you know, there's nothing worse than being broke and being friends with someone who isn't. Because try as you may, you want to be happy for them, but they know, they pick up on it, because you're like, good for you. You needed a third four-wheeler. Maybe if I could be happy like you if I had money. People that are just independent, and this one's me, I get it. Like, I am very, very independent by nature, and there are times where I feel restricted or boxed in by my circumstances, and I go, I'd be happy if I just had some more freedom. What about this one? Because it's almost worse when there is a culturally agreed upon bullseye and we don't hit it. If everyone agrees on the bullseye and you're unable to reach it, what about this one? I could be happier if I was more attractive. No one wants to agree with that. We always like, oh yeah, for other people. I could be happy if. What about and I was thinking through this last night, and we've got this political thing going on right now. And if you know me, I'm not as political as some wish that I were. How many times do you hear people suggesting the world would be better if you saw things the way that I see things? And it's not about convincing you, it's about compelling you. Life would be better if it weren't for the dang, I'm not picking a side because it doesn't matter what side you're on, both sides do it. This whole world would run better if it wasn't for if. See? Life could be better if. And what James is saying is this, is that the goal, the challenge that James is giving us is that imagine a life where you could be happy and you can be fulfilled even when your if is violated. James is saying, imagine the life that you could have if there were no restrictions on your if to your happiness and fulfillment. What if you could even, this is 2019, this goes against everything that we're being taught. What if you could even find joy when you don't get your way? We're so funny because we're such a wealthy country, we're such a free and independent and powerful nation that when we don't get our way, we feel like we've been wronged. Like not only did I get my way, the expectation is I should have got what I wanted based on what? The fact that I wanted it. It's hard to preach to a spoiled nation because when it's an agreed upon thing, then we don't even see it as being that bad. We're spoiled beyond belief that when we don't get what we want, we feel violated based on the fact that we wanted it. That's it. Not that it's good, not that it's worthy, not that God wanted it for us. We wanted it, and that's all the justification that we need. And James is saying, imagine this. Imagine that your joy doesn't hinge on the circumstances that you've given it. Consider it joy, this is James, consider it joy when a chain, so to speak, separates you from the life that you have and the life that you want. I figured it would be kind of quiet, but I'm not sure that I expected it to be quite this quiet. But here's what I know. Nobody has the exact life that they want. No one does. And if we're not careful, it can be the source of anger. Why? Because anger, we talked about it last week, fear, frustration, and hurt. That's the only way you can get angry. The only way that you're ever going to experience anger is if it comes through fear, frustration, or hurt. So we're going to talk about frustration. Imagine trying and feeling. You don't have to be righteous. We can just take a pause for a second from all that and just be honest with each other. You've had times in your life, because I've had times in my life, and I know that we've all had these times where it feels like somehow we don't understand why, but it's almost like God is working against us. My mom used to say this. It's like a savings account was just begging for a financial disaster. You save up a little bit of money. The minute you get a little bit of money saved up, what happens? Bam, it's gone. There's this separation from the life that we're working towards and the life that we're getting. And it seems like every time we turn around, circumstances are working against us. And then James has the audacity to go, imagine finding joy, not when you get what you want, but apart from what you want. I'm going to tell you a story. And I don't think I've ever talked about it publicly, but I'm to a place now that I can. I don't think I could have preached about it for a long time because I don't think I was completely over it. I was cleaning stalls one time in the middle of winter, and I don't know if you know this about me, but you probably do. I hate cold weather. You do. I hate cold weather because it feels like restriction. Like I can't even put into words how much I hate when it's cold. And everybody that's been raised in this part of the world is like, yeah, we know what you mean. No, you don't. And I was cleaning stalls one night, and it was so cold that what I was trying to scoop out of the stalls was frozen to the ground. And as I was trying and I was scooping, it was like chiseling it, and the teeth on the fork started to break, and it was dark, and it was like 2:00 in the afternoon. It's a true story. This is a true story. I sat down. And I very few times in my life will I say the word weep. Like, I don't use the word weep. It's not a word that I use a lot. I sat down and I began to weep. And here's why I was weeping, is I said, God, what did I do wrong? It wasn't based on the cold. It was based on a separation from the life that I had planned for myself. I could not have felt further from the life that I thought I was going to live when I grew up. I thought I was going to work towards something and I was faithful and that God was going to reward me because I was taught, like, if you obey God, God will bless you. And I've never felt less personally loved by God than I did in that moment. And I was weeping. And the reason I was weeping was I was so frustrated. I was so overwhelmed in that moment because I thought, God, what did I do? What? Have you ever felt this way? What turn did I miss? I would go back, I would do it over again. And God, if it was going to lead me to a place where I feel so disconnected from my life that I wanted, why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you warn me? What is going on? What about this? God, do you even know me at all? The things that matter so deeply and so personally to me could not be more off. And I feel like somewhere along the way you have pulled out of my life. And I don't know why. And I don't know how to get back to that place where I feel like that you know me or that you love me. And how did it get here? And it was so triggered by the cold weather because it was so personal to what I didn't want to have in my life. I remember leaving Texas 8 years ago. And I remember thinking, I don't know if I can do this. God, if you really knew me, what about this? What about this? God, if you really knew me and if you really knew my heart, this isn't what you would have given me. Verse 4. So that's part 1. Here's part 2, verse 4. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. Here's the bad part of what I'm about to say, is that you can't hear this verse. You have to live this verse. You have to live what I'm about to say before you can hear it. But if you hear it today, when you live it, you'll remember it. How's that? But if you have lived through what I'm about to talk about, you're going to understand what I'm about to say. There's no way that I can verbally drive this home in a way that's going to make sense. Here's what crushed me sitting there that night. And I was so mad. I wasn't crying because I was sad. I was crying because I just felt destroyed in life. Here's why. Because the realization was this. Not that things were hard. Because if you know me, I'm fine with things being difficult. It's not difficulty that I struggle with. It was the crushing reality that things would never be the way I wanted them to be. No amount of persistence, no amount of faithfulness, no amount of hard work was going to change some realities in my life. There were things that I loved in my life that were dying, and there was nothing that I could do to stop it. You know, in these years of faithfulness and working hard, and there was hope. Here's the problem. I had hope. Hope was the source of the crushing because I had hope that someday things would turn around, that someday this life that I had worked so hard to achieve and these things that I was going to do, that it died. It died. Like, how many of you guys have ever been through, you don't have to raise your hand, obviously, but how many of you guys have ever been through a divorce and you go, this is not how I had this planned in my head when I was a kid? Financial ruin, you lose something, not you lose something that you can get back, but when you lose something you can never get back. This moment where you go, God, do you know me at all? Do you see me at all? That no amount of persistence or hard work is going to reclaim or recapture this. I worked and I worked. Listen to this. See if this sounds familiar. I had worked and I'd worked and I'd worked and I'd worked and it died anyway. And here's what happened in that moment. And it took me years to get over this moment. Listen, it wasn't like that moment, the heavens opened up and an angel came down. He's like, it's going to be okay. I felt like God just sat back and went, then if there's no more hope, I felt like God didn't give me an answer, and that's really what I wanted. Thought I was a failure. I thought I was a failure because I failed to produce the results that I had pursued. Have you ever felt like a failure in their life? And I thought life was going to go this way and life went that way. How did I end up here? So, one is, James says, find joy even when you don't get the things that you wanted. 2 says that God is at work in your life in ways that you wouldn't understand. This persistence of God, the persistence of God, he is producing in your life more than you can see. Like he's at work in your life and you can't see it. And he doesn't have to show it to you. That's the other thing that we do. We're like, God, show me what's going on. Verse 5 in my mind. Verse 5 is where this all starts to kind of come together, because I don't know about you, but I was just angry all the time. I was just angry, and I was angry based on frustration, and I was frustrated based on circumstances that I could not change. I could not change the circumstances no matter how hard I worked, and it created frustration, and the frustration turned into anger, and it wasn't like I was mad at anyone. I just hated myself. I just hated myself because I felt so unable to fix the things that I wanted to fix. I've never felt less competent as an adult, and this was only like 5 years ago. Verse 5. We got to get to verse 5. We got to work through this to get to verse 5. It says, if any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. Did you notice something real quick? And this isn't what the sermon's about, but then when you begin to ask God for wisdom, God says yes, period. The only thing that's going to rob you of the wisdom that God gives you is your own doubt that God wouldn't do it. But it says, if you lack wisdom, you should ask. So consider it joy. God is changing you for the better. But the third point is it's kind of the solution, because it doesn't help us to understand the problem unless we believe that there's some sort of a solution. What a terrible sermon if I just spelled out the problem. I'm like, yeah, so I don't know. The feather is never the feather, and let me explain what I mean by that. Rarely as people do we hold on to bad things. We don't hold on to bad things, because if we held on to bad things that we knew were bad things, or addictions, or things that were hurting us, then the problem is this. When there was enough pressure, if the world applied enough pressure, we would try letting go of it to see if that fixed our problem. Okay, fine, I give up, I quit. I'll give you that last final bad thing that I had so that I'll see if maybe that will work. The problem is not that we hold on to bad things. It's that as people, we tend to hold on to good things too tightly. We're not holding on to something bad. We're holding on to something good. We hold on to it too tightly. Our if, it doesn't say like, I would be happy and I would be fulfilled if God gives me meth. We'd probably all agree like that's probably not good. It's probably like a bad if for your life. I mean, something that we could universally agree on. But we hold on to good things too tightly. So the feather's not the feather. What I mean by that is, how many of you guys, it'd almost be easier if I said how many of you guys haven't. How many of you guys have ever seen Dumbo? For those of you keeping record, I've now talked about my dog and Dumbo this morning. It's a very deep sermon. Let me recap for those of you who just moved here from a jungle somewhere and have not seen Dumbo. There's this flying elephant. I almost feel embarrassed in explaining it, because if you haven't seen it, but I'm assuming we all have. And he's got this little feather, and the feather was like his security blanket, that as long as he had this little feather, he could do great, amazing things. But the feather represented his if. Like, I can do amazing, great things. I can go places. I'm an amazing thing. I have an identity and a purpose. If what? Now, was the feather good? No. Was the feather bad? No. The feather was nothing. The feather was the feather. The problem was his attachment to it. And I think because God is a good God and he's a good father, there are times he intervenes in our life and he goes, it's not what you're holding on to, it's how you're holding on to it. You are a slave to circumstances. You are a slave to things that you have no freedom from. From the rodeo culture, everybody's got the same goal in the rodeo world. And I think there are times where God comes in and goes, think about this for a second. There is a steer. If you want an example, there's a couple hundred around here. He's already caught. If he needed doctored, he's in the chute. If he needed branded, he's in the chute. If he needs any sort of attention, he's already in the chute. But what do? We let him out of the chute. Why? So we can catch him again. And then we caught him. Now what do? Let him go. It's not what we hold on to, it's how we hold on to it. I'll have purpose, I'll have identity, I'm gonna achieve. And God's going, you're holding on to a feather and you're a slave to it. You're a slave to it. What if I were to take this away and you go, then I'm nothing, then I'm nobody, then I'm not a success, then I can't be happy, I cannot be fulfilled. And it's never the things that you would think. Sometimes it's good things like the health of my family. I'm fine, God, as long as my family's healthy. You're a slave to the health of people that you care about. You don't open the door for God to teach you anything deeper than what you can see right now. Can I please just make that point one more time? That you go, God, I could be okay as long as it's between this point and this point. And God goes, well, what if I carry you over here? Because here, you're a slave. You're a slave to a scope. I could be happy in my marriage if my wife would just. I could stay in this marriage if my husband wasn't so. If I just had a better job, if I just had more money, if I just had a better appearance, if. And God's going, you're a slave to the if. You're holding on to this feather as though that's the source of everything good in your life. And you live in fear that someone might take it. You live in this constant subsurface level of fear that says, I'm okay right now, but if. So James says it requires wisdom. It's going to take wisdom to see that sometimes God is doing something on your behalf that you don't see, that you can't understand, and that will make you mad. Thank God. Thank God. He's not intimidated by us. You better not. God's like, oh. Isaiah 55, 8 and 9 says, for my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so my ways are higher than your ways, and my thoughts are higher than your thoughts. And how many times do we really deep down not believe that's true? God, if you really loved me, you would do it my way. God, if you could just really understand me, then there's a way you should be doing things. And we're saying, God, my ways are higher than your ways. Imagine the freedom in our lives. It's going to be hard because if we have a feather, we usually hide it. In sermons like this, we see it coming and we run to the safe in the back of our mind, in the back of our spirit, in the back of our heart, and we lock away our little feather and we're like, we won't even consider that may go someday. Take it all, God. Yeah, what about your identity? Well, but no, not that. But I mean, anything else. We lived in our family, we lived through the loss of a child. My little brother was killed in a car accident, and I wouldn't wish that on anybody. I would not wish that on anybody. But beforehand, I would have, even in my young age, thought that would be the thing that guaranteed to destroy a family. God, take anything, but not that. God, you can do anything in my life, but not that. And now on this side of it, I go, God, if we could survive that. Not that we would choose it. Listen, not that we would choose it, but there's a freedom that comes with going, that didn't destroy me. It's like that first moment where we survive on the other side of an if that we put into place and we begin to fly again, and we don't know how we're doing it because we don't have the thing that we thought we needed to be okay. And God's going, you're experiencing freedom despite your expectations. Do you see the love of God in that moment where it's not that we love something bad, it's that we love something good too much, and God goes, you're a slave to it, and you need to experience freedom in me only. And it's funny because God is opening a lock and letting you out and freeing you from your slavery, and you are mad about it. We're just chewing on this chain like the restriction that is saving our lives. We're like, God doesn't love me. And God's like, yes, I do. What if God, in my life, Jordan, because here's the thing. My life, it wasn't like God was like, okay, you learned it here, you can have it back. There were some things that God took from me that won't ever come back, and I'm okay with it. But what if he hadn't? What if God in my life, and I can't speak to your life because maybe you haven't lived through it yet, maybe you have, I don't know. But what if God hadn't had times where he separated me from my expectations? What if he hadn't? I know people well enough, and I know myself well enough to know this. Had God not specifically and surgically and strategically separated me from the things that I thought were required for me to be okay, had God not separated me from those things, then when he begins to move in my life and health returns to my life, who would have gotten credit for it? I would have become more enslaved the better things became. I go to Judges chapter 7, verse 2, and we're about done. You'll know we're about done because I'm going to close my computer. It's still open, so I'm not quite done. God's about to call Gideon to battle, and Gideon is going, okay, but if we're going to battle, then X, Y, and Z. And God just begins to wipe him off, and he goes, you got too many people. And Gideon's like, I think I have not enough people. I mean, how many people are enough to go to battle? Judges 7, verse 2, the Lord said to Gideon, you have too many men. Listen to this, listen to this. I cannot deliver Midian into their hands, or Israel would boast against me and say my own strength has saved me. That if I gave them victory, they would become slaves. There's only one way. There's only one way this works. There's only one solution. There's only one possible outcome. And this is why James says it's going to take wisdom. And if you don't have it, ask for it because you're going to need it. Because there are going to be times where God doesn't play along and God doesn't do what you say he should do. And God does things that are just so devastating to your identity. There is one solution, and that is this. You have got to know Jesus better, because unless you trust that his plans for you are better than your plans for you, you will be devastated in moments where he sets you free. His love for you will feel devastating. He's going to open the gates and say, you can't give credit to anything else. You can't be a slave to anything else. And it will feel like God has taken from you the one thing you loved the most. And in this case, sometimes it is the thing that you love the most, and that's what God's trying to expose. When I say that I intentionally want to see Jesus better, it's for situations like this where you go, God, I could never live through that. And God goes, you can. You can, you will. If you love me, if you trust me, there's better for you in this than whatever you had for yourself. And here's the problem. You want to go drive yourself crazy? Go home and make a list. And you say, and then, and then, and then. Make up your goals. Whatever your goals are. I want to be rich. And then. What you'll find is that every goal that we've set for ourselves has an expiration. And God's going, it's a prison sentence. It's not restriction, it's slavery. I want a healthy marriage, and then. I want to be happy, and then. I want a better job, and then. God's going, you'll mess all of those things up if you yourself are not in a healthy place. It's like going home and going, I want a clean house. Bam, your house is clean. What happens later? I want it again. It's this loving thing that God does where you walk in and go, I wish this house was clean. And God goes, here's some stuff. You can do it. It's this freedom that God says, what I want to do in your life is more important than what you want to do in your life. And there's one way that we can get there, and that is trust the goodness of God. We have got to learn to trust the goodness of God, and that will take wisdom because it's painful and it's hurtful. There are times where it feels like he's separating you from the things that you love the most, only to detach you from the slavery that comes with it. Let's pray. Lord, when James says, consider it joy, it's almost an insulting idea that we could be joyful unless we understand, God, that you're taking chains off of us. You're not putting restrictions on us. You're taking restrictions off of us. We can consider it joy, God, not based on our circumstances, but based on your identity. God, based on who you are, because of who you are, we can find joy in the process of growing. We can find joy in the process of freedom. That God, the things that make us the most frustrated are going to be the things that you're using to make us the most free. You're giving us freedom from these little feathers that we hold on to, thinking that's why we'll be happy. That's why I'll be. We can't even imagine life without them. And you're going, you've got to imagine life without them. That God, what we find behind the word if is our idols. That's where we find our idols. I could be happy if our idol. I could be fulfilled if, and there are idols. And what you're doing, God, is you're exposing these idols that have robbed pieces of our heart and places on our heart that belong to you. That create restriction and that create slavery. And God, that you're on a mission to create freedom in our lives. Give us that, I pray. In Jesus' name, amen.